Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is JQ Hanna, and I'm the Assistant Director of Food Co-op Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us for our FCI Live Fall 2020 series. And this is our session to be a white ally in food justice. This is a topic we get requests for again and again. We're seeing more and more consciousness and desire for education around this topic, especially from white organizers specifically. And Patrice Lockhert Anthony was gracious enough from Black Label Consulting and Coaching to say she would join us and dive into this topic with all of us tonight. So without further ado, I am going to turn the floor over to Patrice, and thank you so much for being here. Oh, you're muted, Patrice.
And how often do I do that to myself? Hi, I am, my full name is Patrice Lockhert Anthony. It is great to be here tonight with you. I'd like to welcome you here as well, and thank you for choosing to be in this presentation. It is not always an easy choice, particularly given our current day social trials, let's call them, in our country. So to be a white ally in food justice was an easy choice for me, because what Black Label Consulting and Coaching does is build, support, and do deep dives into anti-racist work. So part of doing that work is to not only work with Black folk, but to also grow white allies. And that is not as simple as saying that you are against racism. I think I'm paraphrasing the Angela Davis quote, "It is not enough to be against racism, you must be anti-racist." You must turn it into a verb. It's not a noun, it is a verb. It is a living, breathing thing that you must act on every day, whether you are white, Black, or otherwise. Next slide, please. This is going to be challenging. I'm going to take 30 minutes to share some important information from my perspective. We will have a 20-minute Q&A. I'm going to ask everyone to write down their questions and hold them until the Q&A period. And then we'll have some gratitude on my part, and then JQ closing us out. The information that I'm going to be imparting will be historical, current. Some of it will be disturbing. Next slide. It will also be eye-opening, mind-blowing, and maybe disconcerting, but I think there's plenty of cause for celebration in what I'm going to be sharing as well. It will all be true. There will be no alternate facts here. Next slide, please. Cooperatives, and especially food co-ops, are political by nature. I'm always surprised when I hear co-op GMs or boards talk about not being political, being focused on the bottom line, which of course in our country means money, because how can you do that and call yourselves a co-op? Co-ops by design are political in nature. They are an act of resistance against what is and what is unjust in societies all over the world. Even before they were being called cooperatives, there were people coming together collectively, cooperatively, to make sure they could do more than simply eke out an existence. Think about it. When you think about people in your communities, stories your grandparents have told you about how communities came together when disasters happen, when babies are born, people come together, they're cooperating to make sure that success happens. Next slide, please. Just one of my favorite slides. Next slide, please. Hey, a few bullet points. You cannot be a white ally without knowing and understanding history. Our country has a lot of history. We also have a lot of history that isn't told in terms of truth. We have a lot of history that doesn't get told at all. We have dismissive history. We have people being taken out of textbooks. In Texas, there is a movement to put into school textbooks that African slaves brought here were immigrants, that they weren't kidnapped and brought here. You must study history. You have to do your reading. You have to have discussions with people. There's a lot of work involved in being an ally. If you're unwilling to do that work, you cannot be a white ally. Next slide, please. The next few slides are about two Black people that I chose to demonstrate not only genius, but they're related to food justice, to the food industry, and they are extraordinarily important to what all grocery stores do, but certainly food co-ops. George Washington Carver was an American agricultural scientist and inventor who promoted alternative crops to cotton and methods to prevent soil depletion. Remember that when you keep hearing people talk about new ways of doing farming, they're not new. He was the most prominent Black scientist of the early 20th century. Next slide, please. But his biggest success came from peanuts. I don't know how many of you know that. He became known as the Peanut Man, and in all, he developed more than 300 food, industrial, and commercial products from peanuts, including milk, Worcestershire sauce, punches, cooking oils, salad oil, paper, cosmetics, soaps, and wood stains. And he did experiment with medicines and things, but there's more than just what he did with peanuts. There are the things that come after that. Look at the things that we have on our grocery shelves these days and in our coolers that come from other nuts, almonds, macadamias. You have things that we do, we make flour out of them, different milks. All of that came off of what George Washington Carver created in his day, a constant feeding upon that original idea, if you will. Next slide, please. In 1921, Carver appeared before the Ways and Means Committee of the U.S. House of Representatives on behalf of the peanut industry, which was looking for tariff protection. He described the wide range of products that could be made from peanuts, which not only earned him a standing ovation, but also convinced the committee to approve a high protected tariff for the common legume. That's when he became known as the Peanut Man. Think about what's on our shelves in food co-ops that would relate back to this, whether it's in bulk or on the shelves, on the grocery shelves. There are so many things, whether it's peanuts entirely, in the shell, out of the shell, roasted, salted, raw, peanut butter. But then remember how many other products have peanuts in them, how many different ways that went. Next slide, please. It's important for white co-ops to begin to understand the roles that people of color, and in my case, I'm talking mostly primarily about Black America, the roles that we have played in all of this. The first portable air cooling unit, think refrigerated truck, because that's what it was that this man created. I have that backwards, but Mckinley Jones, can you go back for one slide? I did it out of order. So next slide, please. Thank you. Whoops, there. Frederick McKinley Jones is his name. He invented the refrigerated truck. It was a refrigeration unit. Speaking as a cooperator of 30 plus years, where would we be? Where would we be without this? And remember, he didn't create the American version of it. He invented it. He invented this. So we're talking about something that literally changed the world. If you don't believe that, you only have to think about a co-op without refrigeration units. What happens when you get one of those hot summers that puts too much pressure on the grid and your electricity goes out? And what is it that we end up doing with all of our refrigeration units, the products in our refrigeration units? It was huge. Think about it in terms of production and transportation, getting products from farms and ranches to the stores. It requires refrigeration units. And what they used before were just giant carved out blocks of ice, which melted rather quickly. So this too was huge. It also ended up playing a huge role in the World War because it helped food and medicines last longer. Imagine, and because again, we're talking about how it has impacted not only the co-op, but across that, right? So this also has implications for the medical industry, medicines that have to remain refrigerated and such. So just keep that in mind. And these slides will be made available for you. So you'll have access so you can look at them because I'm not going to be able to read all of them through and still keep my 30 minutes. Oh, JQ, could you remind me like every 10 minutes or so? Next slide, please. This is a report that on your own time, I want you to look up and read. It is huge. It has huge implications for African Americans, for Black communities, and what we spend our money on. Black consumers. This is the McKinsey.com capabilities, growth, marketing, and sales, and marketing to the multifaceted Black consumer. The link is here. When you look up the slides, please look this up and read it thoroughly, because there are two ends of this line that exists for African America. There is African America as consumers, and there are African Americans or communities that fall victim to 500 years worth of white supremacy and the systems that have been put into place based on white supremacy that constantly force African America to have to find other ways to succeed, to be, to do. And so it looks odd to think of food apartheid in African American communities, and on the other hand, to know something like this: $910 billion in spending power in African America in 2019, and by 2030, it is estimated that it will be $1.7 trillion in spending power. And here's what I want people to think about. How can that be true and food apartheid, food deserts also be true? Next slide. There. This is from the Brookings Institution. Home valuation, food apartheid, medical industry, social conditioning. Here's the thing. Everything is connected. Everything is connected. When you talk about building wealth, when you talk about building generational wealth, when you talk about the power of owning your own home, when you talk about wanting to aspire from your starter home to a bigger home, better home, when you want to feed your kids well, good, healthy, nutritious foods like what most co-ops sell. Yes, I know I said most, but tell the truth. You know, some co-ops don't have the best stuff on their shelves. So when you talk about healthy, nutritious foods that you can get into your children before they go to school, which nourishes their body, their brain, which allows them to perform better in school, which allows them to do better, aspire more, dream bigger, get an education, whether they go to college or not. Because that movie, Good Will Hunting, was accurate when the character Will talked about the education you can get for $1.50 in a library card. You don't have to be in structured education environments in order to learn, to grow, to evolve. But still, the medical industry has, for hundreds of years, done wrong by the Black community. To this day, it's hard to get African Americans to trust doctors and other medical professionals because of so many heinous, truly evil things that have been done. But if we're going to all evolve, white allies, people who aspire to be white allies, need to know and understand these things and how they play in to the work that food co-ops are doing. One of the things that a co-op does is have an open and welcoming environment. People feel like they have a place where they can go. That's built on trust. And trust happens when you put actions behind what you say your beliefs are. But trust is severely lacking between African America and white America. And there are very good reasons for that. And we need to do more studying on that. But getting the right food into these bodies keeps them out of the hands, for the most part, of an industry that doesn't honor who they are. There are still doctors today who don't believe that Black people feel pain in the same way that white people do. They have run horrible experiments on Black people without their knowledge or permission. Some of that is still happening. And then when they do studies, to study certain things like cancer or whatever, they rarely have minorities. I hate that word, minorities. I don't like people of color either, but here we go. They rarely include non-white people, participants in those studies, which is problematic because there are things that you can react to as a Black person that a white person may not react to. So it's very important. Foods that can send you to the hospital where you will not get fair treatment. We need to be aware of those things. We need to talk to our communities. If you are in a community that is primarily white, you should be asking yourselves why that is so. Why do you live in a community that's all white? And that's not about blame. It's about understanding how our country has worked to create those communities. Home valuations. An African American is trying to sell their home. They have it appraised, and the appraisal comes back at $275,000. A week later, it's a white person who owns that house, and the appraiser comes, and the house is worth $550,000. This happens. This is real. And it does, I know you're wondering, what does this have to do with food co-ops? It's all related because food co-ops, just like other grocery stores, when they're setting up, what kind of a community are they looking for? One where they think they can make money. They don't usually set up in impoverished neighborhoods. Social conditioning. All of this is about social conditioning. All of this is about what we've been told to think, what we've learned through textbooks, what our teachers have said to us, what our parents have said to us, what our ministers have said to us, what TV programming says to us. I read an article the other day that said that someone had complained about all the police procedural shows that are on TV and how little they show what many of us are experiencing today in terms of racist procedures, racist police officers, racist actions. They don't show anything like what happened, what happens all the time, right? They don't tend to show those in those police procedurals because that wouldn't get a good audience share, right? So those are things that we need to think about in the co-op because we are political animals. Co-ops are political by nature. The whole reason to start a co-op is to want better food in your community, to want locally sourced food in your community, to impact prices of food in your community, to create a place where families can go and feel safe and welcomed, where they can have a voice, where they can have a vote. And that plays a part in the larger society. And we need to start honoring that. Social conditioning is what's responsible for our not challenging systems as they are. But we have to remember that the systems that are in place now were put in place hundreds of years ago. And though we think a lot has changed, it really hasn't. The largest civil rights movement under King, that was only in the 60s. And Black people are still getting killed today. Buffalo, New York, anybody? That young man, that white young man, went to that store knowing, understanding that it was a store where mostly African Americans shopped. He went there knowing that so that he could kill Black people. Co-ops should be talking about that. Food co-ops should be talking about that, and where they build their co-ops, how they embrace communities of color, wanting to make big changes in society. We have people in Washington who work on our behalf to get laws passed and policies that help the cooperative industry. What would happen if we really did that full service? Because we were thinking about the entirety of our 7 principles. Next slide, please. Those are all my deets. My name, the name of the company, address, phone number, and email, which I almost always forget to put. So there it is. I can talk forever on this, just ask JQ, forever on this topic. Instead, right now, I'm going to tell you about a book, and it didn't show when I tried, it disappeared. But it's because of my background. It's called Do the Work, an anti-racist activity book for all the people overwhelmed by racial injustice and white supremacy in America who've taken some action and know they can do more, but don't always know what to do or how to do it, or are afraid of getting it wrong or not knowing enough and are left wondering, what do I do? And this book is full of ideas that you can do, including taking a pledge, challenging people who say things and do things that you know when you hear it, it's not right. So will we continue to be complicit and allow people to say and do and believe things, or will we call them on it when they say or do things or express beliefs that do harm to other at all? But for me, certainly when it has to do with race, don't be complicit. I would welcome you into my world as a white ally if you're doing the work. If you're not doing the work, but wanting to call yourself white ally, you're making my work more difficult, which means, yeah, I can't deal with that. I've got a full plate already. But if you are serious about this work, then we come together as colleagues, as cooperators. We come together as friends who understand just how important, indeed, how urgent this is. It has always been urgent, but for the longest time, it has been Black America tending to the needs of Black America. Well, here's a surprise. It's not only Black America who suffers when racism is allowed to go unchecked. White people suffer from hundreds of years of things that current day white people can sometimes honestly say they had no part in. Here's the problem. It's still here. Somebody has a part in it. Somebody somewhere, either by being quiet, which comes in the form of not challenging, not engaging, or by doing the titular giggle when they hear that uncomfortable little giggle when you hear something that's inappropriate, but you're not quite sure what to do about it and you don't want to feel excluded. America's story doesn't have to continue down this line. It really doesn't. It's easy to think of it that way, but it really doesn't. Change is up to us. And can you think of a better place for that change to be happening than in our co-ops, our food co-ops? Imagine what we can do, the power we will have, because in a food co-op that is run by people who believe in justice, in acting rightly, that means you're talking about it. It means you're discussing with people what should be on the shelves. It means you've really thought about what's on the shelves and how you're inviting people in or going to them to have those conversations. It means that you're taking seriously what it means to even want to be a co-op, much less doing the real work of being one. Cooperation is what this country needs and is looking for, is searching for. And it is on us to help make that happen and to bring more people into the fold. And we can do that. I consult with Black-led co-ops, white-led co-ops, and I also consult with folks outside of cooperation. And it is amazing and so empowering, so nourishing to watch people get it and then go after it. Because the power structure that is doesn't have to be. Stop giving all that power to politicians. The power is ours as citizens. The vote, speaking up, challenging people on what they say and do. Have those conversations. Sitting at a bus stop, have the conversation. Give somebody a ride, some news story comes up or a song comes on. Use that as inspiration to have a little conversation. It might last only 5 minutes, but that person leaves your vehicle thinking about something they might not have thought about that day. Be willing to do that and give me a call sometime. I'd be happy to chat with you about it. Thank you. Q&A.
We'll give folks a minute or two to warm up. Are you okay with people unmuting if they just want to talk, or would you prefer they put in the chat?
They can unmute.
Okay. I know that sometimes it takes people a minute or two to feel like they can speak up. Mary, did you have a question?
I do.
Great.
Hi, thank you so much for this. I feel like it's just the beginning of a conversation I'd like to have with other co-ops on an ongoing basis.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Would you recommend something for us to read or watch or listen to about the history of Black cooperatives in the United States?
Yes. W.E.B. Du Bois, anything by W.E.B. Du Bois. But also, and I can't believe her name is slipping out of my head, Collective Courage. The book's name is Collective Courage.
It's hard to get your hands on too. It's by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nebhard.
Yes. There are portions of it available online. I have, I got her to autograph it. We were both speaking at it wasn't a conference, but a gathering. And I'm like, oh, I usually don't do, was raised in Los Angeles. I don't usually do a whole lot of fan worship, but Jessica Gordon Nebhard is one of my heroes.
Thank you for putting that in the chat.
You're welcome. I just knew not, I don't catch names the first time I hear them, so.
Yeah. She did some good work. It took her a long time, but she put it all together.
Thank you. I'll look for that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd actually say, I don't know if you feel the same. I've been surprised, maybe I shouldn't be, Patrice, that since that book's come out, which has just been a revolution in the cooperative, US cooperative world, this history of Black cooperation, just so powerful. And she's spoken so many places, but we still don't have any videos, we have these videos about, and now their name's slipping my mind, the British folk that are attributed, the cooperative movement's attributed to. And no one's really come out with that alternate narrative other than this hard to find book, even though that changed everything so much, unless you've seen something that I haven't, which would be exciting.
There's a lot of usurpation that happens in this country around anyone who's been marginalized. So, women, people of color. I mean, had any of you guys heard anything about a Black person being responsible for refrigeration units? Hey, I mean, seriously, if that's not a world-changing thing, and yet no one, you got, and it's just such a huge thing. We couldn't do what we do without it. And what Carver did with peanuts and other things like regenerative farming and soil repletion as opposed to depletion. But also, I was trying to think, JQ, my exhaustion and ADHD has reared its ugly head. There's, what was the name of it was about soil regeneration. It was on Netflix, a documentary, and they acted like that they were the ones who had created it, thought about it, all that kind of stuff. And they were taken to task about it, and they issued a public apology for it. So it's a slow thing. Here's something that sort of I've been thinking about it a lot lately and talking with some folks about it. The history of indigenous peoples, whether it's Australia or America or Africa, South America, has been one of taking care of the land, planet, doing what was necessary for them, looking forward to other generations and leaving something for that kind of a thing. And the history of Europeans has been to come in, conquer, take over, and then make sure that the people they violently routed lose their languages, their culture, and then claim victory. It's not much of a victory. Farming was a different industry World War, when industrialization got started. And if you look at what has happened to farming, even before that, if you take what Native Americans, Indigenous Americans, how they worked the land, and during slavery, because they wouldn't listen to the slaves who brought 10,000 years worth of knowledge to this continent, farming knowledge, growing knowledge, agricultural knowledge, 10,000 years of it they brought with them. But they weren't listened to. And so you kept growing the same crop over and over and over and over again, and it ruined the soil, as it always does. It ruined the soil. And so then industrialization comes along, and they figure out all these things that got created to help the military complex. And then the companies found ways to commercialize it and use it to make money. TV dinners, anyone? You know, those are some of those things that came out of it. And it has just run amok and is ruining us. And then you have people come along and start talking about soil regeneration and different ways, like vertical growing. You know, none of that is new. I almost cursed, JQ. None of that is new. It has been done before, over and over and over again. And the knowledge of it was taken. And then they claimed credit for something that they didn't actually do. It's not an accident that people don't know about George Washington Carver and peanuts. It's not an accident that they don't know about Jones and his invention of refrigerated units. And both of those things, as I mentioned before, have spawned so much else and inspired so much else, and yet people don't know the story, the stories. So yeah, don't get me started. Just don't get me started. Like medicines, come on, folk medicine. So many cures came from the land.
We've got a couple questions for you in the chat.
Okay.
Do you mind me reading them to you?
Nope, I haven't been in the, 13. It went from 6 to 13. Okay, ask away.
So hi, this is from Ali, who's listening in. He said, I'm finding now that many co-ops are in the know of building in a more inclusive and critical way, yet they're still largely coming up as affluent white and not made up of working class people in their membership. What examples of projects can you share where theory has come out to equally represent those in most need? Thanks.
I'm going to annoy you and ask you to say that again.
That's okay. I think that the main gist of the question is a lot of people are aware of this all theoretically now, you know, needing to be more inclusive and more critically thinking through who we're serving. Yet most of these co-ops are still very affluent and white and not made of working class people. Do you know of any examples of projects where, you know, where this has gone beyond theory and has come out as really equal representation in co-ops of those who are most in need?
I know that Black folks got tired of waiting and they're opening up their own co-ops with good reason. I know that the white-led co-ops that I know, the pity of it is that we're still using the term like white-led, black-led. They're co-ops, for crying out loud. I was president of Green Star Co-op in Ithaca, New York. I was on the board for at 2 separate times, but for a total of about nine or 10 years. And I was president for the last 3. So from I almost said 1916, 2016 to 2019. And I was the first person of color, first Black person to head up the institution. And it was over 40 years old when I became president. So the problem is that people, even in co-ops, tend to revert to capitalistic natures and start looking at that bottom line and the bottom line only, or saying truly absurd things. One of them that was said to me is, we were talking about DEIJ work, and what was said to me by another board member was, well, we have so many other things that are really important right now. We can get to that when we settle these problems. And what I ask people to do when they say things like that to me is, I'm sorry, did you hear what you just said? Because I think you just told me that diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice isn't all that important. And I have a thing about words. I'm a writer. I have a thing about words. I think we need to be more conscious and conscientious about the words we use, how we string them together, because there's a whole lot of, oh, that's not what I meant. That's not what I intended. I'd like to hear those phrases a little less and people to think through what they're saying. Yeah, so the short answer is yes, you can find a few cases, but generally speaking, what happens if it is a predominantly white board, and as is usually the case, a white GM, you're going to find that even when they begin those types of initiatives, something shortly comes along to take its place. And then they'll say something like, well, we tried, but. So this is why I implored at the end of the slides that we do that. Start being conscious and cognizant and stepping in and stepping up, speaking up.
We've got another question that feels pretty related, but I think it is a little bit jump off point. Is there any examples basically that you've seen of co-ops to actually putting racial justice work front and center in their work? What did that look like? What kind of, is there any examples?
Not to speak of myself too much, but we did it at Green Star for a while. Green Star is known for its flower program, and that's one that gives you a discount based upon your income. We were known for really talking to people in the community, people of color in the community, and finding out why they weren't at the co-op, coming into the co-op. A lot of them thought it was a hippie place where, rich, idle white people came to hang out and have, different conversations. And one of the things that helped was, well, without my doing anything, when I ran and was elected as president, when the Black community heard that a Black woman had been elected, they came shopping, and at first probably just to look and see, but it also meant that more people of color came in to apply for jobs. It meant that we were able to, we had always done awareness work around LGBTQ, not the best work, but we had always acknowledged that. And we had some gender awareness, but we actually had a few people leave the co-op when I made it clear, because I also wrote for our newsletter at the time, that this is what it was going to be. It was going to be anti-racist. We were going to be more concerned, more aware, so forth and so on. And we had all the stickers up everywhere. This is a safe space. We are anti-racist, da 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 da. And there were some people who thought we're, you know, remember the classic response to Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, sort of those kind of responses, and they quit the co-op. There aren't that many places. There aren't that many co-ops, which really is a pain in the ass. It really is, because again, the reason co-ops exist is to answer to the injustice in the world, economic and otherwise. And that we sit on our hands instead of doing this really important work. Any other questions?
Well, I think we could keep going, but I also think we're at that point. You said you wanted 3 minutes for gratitude, so we're about the right point.
Okay. Just reach out to me if you have questions. I will happily answer your questions. It may take me 2 days to get back to you, but send me your questions and I'll answer them. I do want to express gratitude. I want us all to express gratitude. So my gratitude is that you saw this title, you registered for it, and you followed through, and you came and you listened and you engaged. I so appreciate that. I know it is your valuable time. It is all of our valuable time, and that we are willing to give of it to this means so much. And your being here has nourished me. I hope that what I've had to say has nourished you. And I would be ever so grateful if you would take that nourishment and pass it on. So thank you very, very much. You're muted.
Sorry, we've got an extra minute too. So feel free to put your gratitudes in the chat, but also feel free to unmute and share your gratitudes if you'd like before we wind up for the evening. I am going to real quick share a few closing thoughts. First, we just want to deepest gratitude to Patrice for being here, for being a part of the series, and continuing to support FCI's work. Has done several trainings for us, and we hope we'll continue to into the future. Do want to point out, coming up tomorrow, a perfect month in the life of your board with Joel Kopishki will be happening. This is about how do you run your board and how do you build systems in your board to make it all move through seamlessly so you can focus on other work. And he's going to be helping us with that. And then we have Kenya Baker from Dayton Unified Power coming to talk to us specifically about Black cooperatives and forward mobility, how using principles of community organizing that they were able to drive forward so successfully the Gem City market, and how to use those principles. We have series of more sessions coming up all the way through Thursday. We hope you'll join us for some of those. And we have to take a moment and thank our sponsors who without we would not be able to do this. So thanks so much to the USDA for making this series possible, to National Cooperative Bank, to National Cooperative Grocers, and to CoBank. We deeply appreciate them making this possible. And again, thank you so much to Patrice. Thank you guys for being here and listening and being a part of it.
and go out and tell people what they missed.
This video will be available soon, and I'll be sending out a email tonight that will have Patrice's email address, as well as a quick link to a 3-question survey that if you could fill out for us, so we can know how the session went for you and make sure we provide the best content for you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys. Remember, we can't heal unless we do it together.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.